Greetings, weirdlings! I am Danny Danger, and this week, the US Supreme Court ruled in favor of marriage equality. A historic moment for American civil rights that, let's face it, has been long overdue. The geek community responded with its own unique kind of glee. Local comic book shops had some particularly moving moments, but I think the warm and fuzziest moment of them all belongs to Red Pegasus Comics, who opened their store late, but opened later as legal husbands. Star Clipper in St. Louis, Missouri took a moment to remind us how the Lantern Corps feels about #LoveWins. And all over the country, local comic book shops displayed their favorite books featuring stories about and stories written or drawn by queer people. The joy expressed throughout the nation made me cry ugly tears. It feels like it's been a really long time since we've had a win, since I could wake up in the morning and say, hey, I'm proud to be an American. The ruling got me thinking about the landscape of queer characters in comics, specifically how we frame their relationships, their intimacy, and how they reflect on our community. As a creator of YouTube content and a purveyor of fine graphic novels, I feel very passionately about representation of marginalized groups of people in media. We talk a lot about representation mattering for the benefit of these groups, these peoples, these cultures, but let's be real, everyone in the world needs more empathy. Media engages people in a way that makes them feel and care and relate, which is why I feel like all media needs to step forward into the future with this new ruling. Indie titles historically seem to normalize same-sex or bi-pansexual relationships the best. Strangers in Paradise has been around for 20 years, over 20 years, and it sets the tone for empathetic look into the lives of bi-pansexual protagonists. The series solidly introduces the premises that sexuality exists on a spectrum by normalizing bisexuality through the Kachu, David, Francine love triangle. And Francine's struggle with her sexuality is what makes the comic so moving. Terry Moore celebrated by posting this image, and again, ugly tears. Currently running indie titles are doing a great job of representation too. Boom Studios' Lumberjanes is an adorable fan-favorite comic about an all-girls summer camp, and it introduces Mal and Molly, two young girls, reminding us that there are gay preteens and children, and that just like same-sex relationships, you don't have to sexualize a relationship to make it moving. Other titles like The Wicked and the Divine, Love and Rockets, Captora, Sex Criminals, I could go on and on about image and indie publishers representing the queer community. Rat Queens not only features queer characters, but it featured a one-shot about Braga, a transgender prince turned hired sword. Or axe, you know, whatever. Now, pornography in comics is nothing new, but books like Smut Peddler and Sunstone combine erotic imagery with intimate looks at the love and relationships surrounding them. It destigmatizes many queer and sexual communities, including the S&M community, transgender community, whose dating lives are usually displayed through an otherwise inaccurate lens. Plus, they're just really good quality smut. Now, let's talk the big two. Marvel has introduced a slew of new queer characters and doesn't shy away from focusing storylines on their relationship. Marvel's first canon gay wedding was a well-publicized event and very much ahead of its time. But the real winner in Marvel Comics are Wiccan and Hulkling. In Avengers: The Children's Crusade and both Young Avengers titles, the stories practically center around this adorable couple. We see them, falling in love as a young couple. We see them growing into young men. We also see them fight and break up at a certain point. Their relationship is probably one of the most emotionally moving and representative relationships in comics. And it's definitely one of my favorite relationships in the Marvel Universe. How can you look at them and not go, aww? Marvel's queer relationships are very representative in the younger and newer generations of heroes. The editorial staff is clearly committed to telling compelling stories about all kinds of relationships. In Runaways, you've got Carolina Dean and Zavin, who is trans. In Fearless Defenders, you've got Valkyrie and Dr. Annabelle Riggs. And in Avengers Arena, we even explore the unrequited love between friends Colin Bloodstone and Aiden, which I thought was a really good-humored approach to the awkwardness of having a crush on your straight best friend. This is not to say that Marvel is perfect. The announcement that the X-Men's Iceman was gay was really problematic for a lot of people because they felt like Jean Grey took away his agency by outing him. Now, I don't necessarily agree with this perspective personally, although I respect and understand those who do. I think that in a story about teenagers, this really isn't that big of a deal personally. Now, remind me to tell you the story of how I accidentally outed one of my friends in high school. Nobody's perfect at 16. Me personally, I would like to talk about Storm's bisexuality. Now, back in the days when Chris Claremont was writing the run, he sort of alluded to the fact that she might be attracted to women, but it was never touched again. I know it'll be a while before she's dating, rest in peace, Logan, but I would like to see her with a woman. Maybe the current Thor. Now kiss and touch lightning bolts. The biggest problem that arises for Marvel is the lack of queer diversity in their cinematic universe. Now, the cinematic universe has a much wider reach, making it all the more important that we represent queer characters here. If Age of Ultron deemed the Hulk-Widow romance relevant, then why aren't we validating the Cap-Falcon ship? And when are we going to discuss Loki's comic book canon bisexuality? DC is problematic. Historically, DC came under very heavy fire back in the late 40s for the presentation of Batman and Robin's relationship and the Wonder Woman comic on the whole. Now, the classic Wonder Woman comic and her origin is a whole sexuality package that we will talk about later. They might have had a point on Wonder Woman, but nonetheless, under the Wildstorm and Vertigo titles, they've had some really powerful same-sex couples. Apollo and Midnighter? I mean, come on. Now, what about DC's treatment of its most iconic characters, the characters that they merchandise? Like Marvel, DC has a fair number of openly gay, lesbian, and bi-pansexual characters. But rather than these characters telling progressive narratives, their treatment often causes a lot of controversy. Let's talk about Batwoman. The storyline of Batwoman's relationships is a really confusing, rocky road. Writers handled her relationship with Renee Montoya, The Question, and her later girlfriend Maggie really well, and Batwoman seemed to be at the forefront of LGBTQ representation in mainstream comics. Until the higher-ups at DC mandated that Kate and Maggie could not get married, causing the creative team to leave the book and taking many fans with them. Regardless of DC's defense that no one in the Bat family is allowed to be happy ever, many feel like the queer community was robbed of a liberating moment. Now, Catwoman is currently in a relationship with a woman and was very recently established as canon bisexual. While this was a victory for many who love Selina, as well as a fitting character trait, fans with preconceived misconceptions about bisexuality attributed her character coming out to a reinforcement of a stereotype that I've seen best described as the predatory Jack Harkness trope, that her bisexuality is non-discriminatory and often a manipulative means to her character's end. It was not a butt joke. Maybe it was a butt joke. Once Selina came out, fans continued to heavily question the nature of Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn's relationship. Writer Jimmy Palmiotti took to DC's official Twitter feed to answer fan questions about Harley, leaving their relationship status open to interpretations ranging from they're just friends who like to screw around to they're in a polyamorous relationship. That was vague and completely dissatisfying. Why is DC so wishy-washy on defining the relationship between these two women? The stance in the past has been answered with the question, why is it important? Romance isn't pertinent to every character's story. Historically, the DC universe has been rife with stories centered around straight romance. Wonder Woman and Superman have a comic coming out that could have stolen half of its cover art from a gas station romance novel cover. Nightwing and Starfire couldn't keep their hands off of each other when they were in a relationship, not that I'm complaining, and Black Canary and Green Arrow's wedding was kind of a big deal too. Does excluding your queer characters from an otherwise pro-romance comic book universe qualify as queerbaiting? To determine that, we have to define queerbaiting. What is it? Queerbaiting is when a story implies that a character is queer so as to capture the queer or queer-friendly audience but never actually acknowledges it. It's harmful because it reinforces the social stigma that outward expression of queer romance is flaunting it, that queer romance just doesn't have a place in society for PDA the way that straight romance does. In a society with media over-inundated with straight sexual expression, this is a really unfair perspective and it needs to stop. So if you only vaguely out your queer character and shy away from showing that character's expression of their sexuality, are you still reinforcing that stigma? Whether Poison Quinn qualifies as queerbaiting or not, you can't deny that DC has been queerbaiting Wonder Woman fans forever. Many of her writers have written her as appearing to be bi-pansexual, yet it's never outwardly sanctioned or even discussed by the publisher. When you consider the prospective positive impact of outing an iconic hero and gender equality symbol in our social climate, it makes me really cranky that they've been doing this for so long, especially when I look at the currently running Wonder Woman comic. We did an episode to further explore the issue of Wonder Woman's sexuality, and you can check it out down below. It was a lot of fun. You should check it out. I could talk about it forever. You could make a similar case for several DC characters. Starfire, totally pansexual. Booster Gold and Blue Beetle, gay. Tim Drake, asexual, demisexual, and even Batman and the Joker as demisexual. This is not to say that DC is without its saving graces. Convergence has rebooted several titles, and the Midnighter #1 is really great. Greg Rucka's The Question is amazing. And Grayson #9 also has people questioning Dick Grayson's sexuality. And even if it's just hopeful reaching and slash fic fodder, I'm into it. Before we go, you may have noticed that from all the characters I've referenced, the trans community is barely visible. This isn't to say that there aren't trans characters in comics, but so very few that are well-known heroes. It's important to note that while we say that this ruling is an LGBTQ victory, it does little to address the concerns of the transgender people in their everyday lives. Issues like income equality, social attitudes, and safety concerns should be an immediate topic of conversation in the wake of the SCOTUS ruling. This absence of trans characters as a mainstream group in comics, especially when compared to the presence of other gay, lesbian, and bi-pansexual characters, speaks volumes about the progress we have yet to achieve in media. For more information about how you can help improve the lives of transgender Americans, please check out the PFLAG website and the HRC. Really great resources for how you can help and we can move forward into the future. How do you feel about queer representation in comics? Tell me down below in the comments, because how we start a conversation about this is by doing just that, starting a conversation. Share this video so we can have more active conversations in the world about our queer characters. Show people, show publishers what we want. Also, be sure to like this video, share, and subscribe, because we do this all the time. We talk about social issues, we do comic book reviews, just all kinds of geek shenanigans that you will love. I hope. Okay, one more time. We're gonna nail this. We're gonna do it. Okay.